Good morning, everybody. Week 3 of NFL action is upon us. Welcome to the NFL Food for Thought podcast. I'm Justin Carlucci here alongside of Andre. Drizzy, what's going on, man? Filling in for the Chief Will Priester this week. It's good to have you next to me. How are you, man? How's your week?
What's going on? I'm doing pretty good, hanging in there, trying to brush off these NFL slates that I've been having a rough time with the past 2 weeks, but ready to get back in the lab this weekend. Hopefully, get a jump start on it early and hopefully take something down because I put it out there to the universe, and when I put it out there, I work hard to get it, make it happen.
The grind never stops, man. The grind never stops. Always trying to get better. You're one of the most competitive people I know, and I like that about you a lot. And I know you're very transparent with your process. And hey, hard work pays off. So I think there's good fortune ahead of us. You had a hell of an MLB season, and man, talk to me about week 2. We're gonna get right into it. Elephants in the room. There's a lot of takeaways from this past week. Some pretenders, maybe some contenders in terms of some of these teams. If you play that he said, she said, like this team beat this team 1 week, so they should beat another team. That philosophy just doesn't work in the National Football League because best example ever, we saw, Jameis Winston smack Green Bay, right? And then they went out and got kind of trunched by the Chiefs Panthers in week 2. So, wow. If I said, what's the biggest elephant in the room to you? Do you have what's your biggest or like most favorite takeaway after you saw week 2 games?
After saw week 2 games, my biggest takeaway is probably, honestly, always play Derrick Henry on every slate. Like, no matter what it is, play that man. He's a beast. He's an animal. He's the way he is. He is the reigning rushing championship of 2,000 yards, I think, with 2 consecutive seasons for a reason. So to me, that's my biggest takeaway. Like, I wasn't really on him most of the week last week until like I was telling pre-show like 10 minutes before lock when I was talking to my friends after watching some quick film on Tennessee and Seattle, and I'm just like, there's no reason why he can't just run over Seattle and do what he normally does to everyone else. And sure enough, that's what he did. It went up and had a huge performance. So yeah, that was my biggest takeaway, is to make sure, try to get Derrick Henry in most of your lineups in every single week and take a chance on this guy. But also just make sure I refine my research process and dig in more. Hit those corners I haven't hit and that I didn't look at before, and watch more film on these players and see what you can come up with, because you never know what you might find in that process, in that time. And it really, truly does help. Because if I would have had more of them, I think I would have had more of a successful week and had a good ROI instead of a negative one.
Yeah, and we'll get to story time and GPP food of the day at the end of the show. But last week on this podcast, I said to Will, the most Titans thing ever would be to go into Seattle and win that ball game. And sure as shit, it happened. Wasn't pretty. It wasn't ideal. Henry had the huge second half. Taylor Luuch actually got hurt before the game and didn't play. Starting Pro Bowl left tackle. I don't know if that was a blessing in disguise or not, because he was playing 8 months removed off an ACL, got absolutely embarrassed by Chandler Jones in week 1, gave up 5 sacks himself and 2 forced fumbles, which totally flipped that first game on his head. And I was wondering, okay, there's a ton of question marks about this Titans team. I don't know. And the thought started rolling in everybody's head. Well, Julio barely practiced in August. Tannehill had COVID. They had like a week to play together. They look like they didn't miss a beat against Seattle. A.J. Brown had a couple uncharacteristic drops, so I guess it doesn't hurt to have a Hall of Famer on the other side of him. But I was just so impressed with how in sync Tannehill and Julio was, and Tannehill in general, 350 yards, no touchdowns to show for it. But in that environment, it was so loud there to have total control of that offense. With the new offensive coordinator, everybody was like, oh no, Arthur Smith left. And what's he doing with Atlanta? You tell me, right? So I'm not really worried about that. But the poise of that Titans team, the defense, I don't know. A lot of blown coverages. We expected points from that Seattle side, but everybody was saying DK Metcalf bounce back, but it was Tyler Lockett again. If Chris Carson was chalk, he got bailed out by 2 touchdowns, only had 37 yards on the ground. Both chalky running backs got bailed out, though, by the way. Najee Harris with that 1 reception for a touchdown. I know, and it's the NFL, and these things happen, but they were bottled up besides that. So the chalk was okay. But I'm with you. I think the Titans maybe a season saver there in Seattle. And don't look now. They have the Colts without Carson Wentz. They have the Jaguars after that. And Derrick Henry loves the Jaguars, Dre. So, but that's going to be a headache moving forward. Is it going to be Julio? Is it going to be AJ? Is it going to be Henry? We know at the price points they're going to be at is, a lot of touchdown equity is very important there. So I'm with you on that. To me, a big thing is Tampa Bay is really good and Atlanta is confirmed really bad. We just still don't know where the volume's going to go on Tampa Bay from week to week. Everybody loved to write off Mike Evans after week 1. Scored, had a pretty good game. Antonio Brown, his face was on a milk carton, Dre. Completely missing. Tampa Bay scored 48 points. But outside of Gronk, none of those receivers were in optimal lineups because the ball was spread around. Typical Tom Brady fashion. What are your thoughts about ageless Tom and Atlanta?
Yeah, ageless Tom, man. Like, I was double the feeling on him too, but I didn't have enough. Like, that was my only thing too. I hate about that. I should have had more of that game of that environment with him in there because he was great. He's as he's getting older, he's just using his brain a lot more. And this comes from just me playing football back in the day and coming from like my dad who coached it and everything. I see the game differently, and I know how he's just using his brain to just outwork everybody else. And that team is only going to get better. Like you said, week to week, you don't know who the target is going to be. So to me, like if they're in a good matchup like they were yesterday, you got to just play everybody, play different targets, and hope you're on the right guy. Because obviously we saw Mike Evans, I think, have 2 touchdowns and Gronk have 2, if I'm correct, and Godwin have 1. So he was just throwing the ball to everybody. I just wanted we wanted Antonio Brown to get in there one time, but I think Antonio got a lot of love week 1, so they knew he had to cool off at some point, maybe for week 2, and just let everyone else eat a little bit too to keep everyone happy. So it's going to be interesting to see going forward. If old man Brady can keep this up, I can't see why they cannot win another Super Bowl. And he wins the MVP, honestly. And that's I know it's early to talk about MVP, but the way he's looked these first 2 weeks with 9 touchdowns and 2 interceptions, I think it's looking real good for him right now. And that team is only going to get better because their defense is not playing up to standard yet that they were last year. So I like them for sure. And Atlanta, I don't even know what to think about them, man. They're just like horrible. Like you would think when I understand Julio left, but Matt Ryan's up there in age, but you got a young tight end in Pitts that should be able to pretty much be a mismatch nightmare against everybody. And Ridley, who I think is a really good talented receiver and definitely a number 1. You should just be able to go out there and get it and get some of these and get some of these yardage and wins. And they haven't shown it. They haven't lived up to expectations. They were competitive yesterday, which was better to see from them than against the Eagles, which I think they should have probably put a more of a better performance against them. But I think we're just seeing that they have a decent offense that can perform well if they can hang in there early, and a defense that needs a lot of work. It's still in a team that I'm going to be looking to pick on almost every single week, which will bring me to later on against the show who I want to know is if this guy's going to be one of the highest owned players on the slate because of the matchup that he's in against them this week. But yeah, those are my 2 takeaways from that game and that environment.
Atlanta should have the pass script every game. Everyone was concerned, well, the Titans don't have Arthur Smith. They're going to struggle. Maybe it's more so Arthur Smith doesn't have Derrick Henry. You can't run that same offense with Mike Davis and Wayne Gallman if you leave. You can't. And you could probably make a strong argument. I mean, I will that Ryan Tannehill is probably twice the quarterback Matt Ryan is right now. But right now, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I totally keep playing those pass catchers, and Ridley and Pitts were okay. In fact, the guy who won the 750K power sweep on DK, $150 entry, $150K to first on the main slate, had an Atlanta stack with Matt Ryan, who had 22 DK points, Ridley, who had 19, and Kyle Pitts, who had 12. Thing is, he hit all the one-offs. He had Derrick Henry, who dropped 50 at 7%. Rondell Moore is a one-off, and he had 27. And he had Cooper Kupp, who had 39. It worked salary-wise. You just have to hit all of those one-offs. I mean, if Derrick Henry goes for a pedestrian 25 in that game, I mean, you obviously don't win. So it can be done, stacking the Falcons, even when they don't go crazy if you hit your one-offs. And it's not the approach I would take or want to take, but it worked out for him. And I think that's another one of my big takeaways is the consistent love for Cooper Kupp that Matt Stafford has, and rightfully so. But we have 2 weeks of data now. And in terms of target market share, Cooper Kupp had 38% in week 1 against Chicago and 37.9% of the target market share in week 2. And it's good to see him healthy. Nothing against Jared Goff, who's currently keeping it close with Green Bay as we're recording. But it's good to see Matt Stafford push the ball down the field, and Cooper Kupp is healthy. So that's big for me. The air yard market share of some of these guys, now that we have 2 weeks in, Cooper Kupp, super consistent, commanding targets through 2 weeks. Deontay Johnson is the 5th highest share in the league. And he was injured on the last play of that Pittsburgh game. And we'll talk about injuries. Reports today were that he seems to be okay, although he's questionable, which is big. So just seeing these guys get consistent work. The big one for me in terms of not seeing consistent work is, I'm assuming you watched Sunday Night Football between Baltimore and Kansas City. Tyreek Hill, 42% target market share week 1. Baltimore doubled him most of the game. 13% of the target market share. Mahomes was hitting everybody else on the field. Couldn't get the ball to Tyreek. Do you think teams are going to take this blueprint? And how would you build with Kansas City moving forward? I know it's one game, but it was certainly interesting. And I still kind of can't believe Baltimore won that game looking back at it, but Tyreek, quiet night over there. What are your thoughts?
I thought it was a good game plan, honestly. That's the way I think every team should attack Tyreek. He has track speed on the NFL field. That's the best way to describe it. This man is just the fastest guy in the league. You have to double team, pay him the attention, just hope someone else beats you. They have a lot of other guys that, obviously you got Harmon there, you got Pringle, and then you also got Travis Kelce there, who received a lot of the targets, which is good for him. But going forward, if teams were to run this type of defense against them, there's no reason why they can be successful. But I don't think every team can or has the necessary pieces, or as far as on defense, to keep up with that speed, which I think is eventually going to get to them and hurt them. But I think that honestly, going forward, when it comes to fantasy matchups, I think we should definitely keep that in mind, but still play Tyreek, because all it takes is one catch, one big play from Tyreek, and he can break a slate. He can break defenses' backs, and that's to me, that's the thing I take away from it mostly is, hey, I will look into it, because Baltimore is also a good defense. They have a good defensive-minded coach. They lost two key players on defense. One of them obviously being their corner, but I just think that you can take some things away from it with the blueprint, but still continue to play these guys, and that's a different animal as far as the matchup and with Baltimore. But any other team, like if they were to play Jacksonville, I'm not going to worry about Tyreek Hill not being able to get open against Jacksonville, because he's going to find a way. Or if not, Andy Reid's going to put him in situations moving around on the field a lot where you can't double team him. So I think we might see a lot more of him coming out of the slot more too, which will help out a lot of trying to take away from that double team and moving around on the field. I think you're muted.
Yep. What else you got from week 2? I know we talked about a couple of guys pre-show, and you mentioned the Vikings.
Yeah. One thing I got with the Vikings, Vikings, I told my friends this, and this is one thing I've always said about Kirk Cousins. You cannot count him out. On weeks that he does not, that you don't expect him to perform well, he will surprise you. And that's exactly what he did in week 2. He performed really well against Arizona, which I wasn't expecting. So I was wondering if that defense was actually really a good defense with the way they got to the Titans week 1 and Chandler Jones having 5 sacks. But as you see, the Cardinals lost a lot of players. Actually got a lot of players that were hurt on defense from what I'm looking at here from the injury report, which I think contribute to it a little bit too. But I still think that you got to take chances on Kirk Cousins. He has 3 good receivers now: Osborne, Jefferson, and Thielen. To me, and then a running game when you can either put on Madison or Cook. To me, that's a good offense. I think there'll be something that Green Bay has to contend with this year for the division. But I overall think that they're a good passing attack and someone you should definitely look at every single weekend in the matches that they take. And just move on from there. But also, one thing I took away from a DFS perspective is play the guys that you want to play. Don't let no one talk you off of those plays because that's very, very important. And one thing I also took away was making sure my player pool, as far as a quarterback play, is narrowed down and taking more stands because that's what I think NFL is about. A lot of volatility you have, you can't play everybody. This is not like basketball or baseball. The sport is different where one play can change everything. Especially if you're 1% owned or a high owned play, because obviously we know how it goes, and anyone could be anyone on any given Sunday. So take those chances. If you like a quarterback that no one thinks is popular, play that guy if you like him a lot and you find a reason to play him. But just try to make sure you know your construction is different and you have the right plays in place to go with that and the reasons to play those guys.
Here's a burning topic here. You're a Saints fan, so I know that's probably not what you want to talk about, but for DFS purposes, like, should someone be worried about Kamara, who actually played more snaps percentage-wise than he did week 1, or what's going on with Winston? How long's his leash? What's your take on New Orleans and Kamara, probably most importantly?
Honestly, like I like Kamara a lot. I was high on him at the beginning of the year, but then like if you go back to even when Winston was playing with Tampa Bay, he didn't target the running back a lot in the backfield for those passing catches, which is what Drew Brees did when he wasn't throwing it down the field. And I think that Sean Payton wants to get the ball down the field more as much as he possibly can. So to me, that's going to take away from a lot of Kamara's snaps. So to me, I think you still have to play Kamara every single week because those just chances that can happen where he can get 10 targets in the passing game and get about 10 to 15 rushing attempts, and he can break one of those loose. But I just think that the target share is just not there, even though it should be, especially with Michael Thomas not being out because they want to push the ball down the field. So that's what I take away from it is play him, but also make sure the price is right. I don't know if he's on this week's slate coming up. Let me check real quick. Running back. I don't. Yeah, he is there. He's playing against New England. He's at 8,200. So the market has adjusted pretty quickly to his role and how he's being used mainly. And as you see, he had 20 attempts in week 1 to only 8 attempts in week 2. But that also might be just the way the game has been going too, because they were down to Carolina pretty much all game. So we might have to wait maybe one more game to get more data on it, because he also was targeted 6 times and had 4 receptions in that game as well. So it might just have to wait out and see and how effective they're going to be. And they really had a good game plan against Carolina. I didn't get a chance to watch the film yet on that, but I probably will take a look at that tomorrow morning, just to get an idea of what happened. But I think you can't write them off yet. But at the price of this week of 8,200 going against New England, someone I might be maybe a little bit interested in, but not that much. It depends on how everything else breaks out in the slate, and whatever other plays that I find that I like.
Here, if there's a silver lining, he led the team in targets in week 2, which was 6. He's not getting peppered with them like Breeze was, and he had 4 in week 1, which was second on the team. Yeah. The thing is, like, okay, Sean Payton wants to push the ball downfield. Who's he going to throw it to? Like, where's Marquez Callaway? Where's the preseason hype train? Like, is he relevant right now? And by the way, I'll piggyback off this so I can pass the mic back over to you. the old cliche, Bill Belichick takes away the opponent's best player. Do you buy that crap or not? Like, can you take away Kamara out of a game? I don't know. What are your thoughts about this one? He's going to be contrarian. Like, I think people will probably shy away from Kamara. I mean, we're used to him coming in at 20-25% right in tournaments because he's so damn good. But I mean, we might see 10-12% this week at that price in the matchup.
There's no way to me you take Kamara out of the game just because his rushing ability and his passing ability out of the backfield. I don't know how you'll be able to do that because he can always break one off for a long run. And from just looking at the Jets game yesterday, they can still run the ball a little bit on the Patriots. I don't think they're fully healthy yet, and capable and have everyone back to where they can do well on defense yet. But they can and probably will sack the box because these receivers are no one to fear. They got Chris Hogan, Marquise, like you said, Marquise Callaway. There's a Deontay Harris and Humphreys and Ty Montgomery who doesn't even really play. I'm not fearing any of those receivers, and they also have great corners. So to me, I expect them to be low owned, and it is a reason to. I expect probably the Patriots to bring a lot of blitzes, and play the box a lot, just to try to stop Kamara as much as possible from getting any positive yardage. So it is a reason for him to not be a good play, but I would still play him a small amount of lineups, maybe just be contrarian and be different, just because I know how I am. And plus, I'm a Saints fan, so got to root for your team because I was down on them in week 1, and then they surprised me and won against Green Bay. So I think that anything is possible, but Kamara will definitely be a contrarian play on next Sunday's slate, and I think he's worth a look a little bit in tournaments.
Okay, so one more game. I think maybe we learned a little bit more about each team is maybe the Eagles are a little more of who we thought they were going to be. Cakewalk in Atlanta week 1, great for DFS and fantasy. Week 2, the Niners come across the country, hold the Eagles to 11 points. Jalen Hurts under 200 yards. I had 82 on the ground and a touchdown, though. That's where he gets his value. But he really spread the ball around so much. Quez Watkins, 2 targets for 117 yards and 2 catches. That's crazy. Dallas Goedert, 2 targets. Kenneth Gainwell, 3. Zach Ertz, 2, who got put on the COVID list today, by the way. Jalen Reagor, 5. Miles Sanders, 2. So it's like, here's kind of a low-ish volume pass offense. Kind of reminded me of like the poorest man's Baltimore offense in the way it's set up. You have a scrambling quarterback with a vanilla run game because who does Baltimore have, and you have a bunch of guys on the outside who, outside of Devontae Smith, who I want to get to in a second, is like, you don't know where the ball's going. So how do you stack these guys? I don't think you can right now. However, Devontae Smith, 7 targets, only turned it into 2 catches and 16 yards, but he has consistently owned that target and air yard market share. So although there's not much on the stat sheet to look at from week 2 with Devontae Smith, I'm totally fine with going back to him because it seemed like out of anybody, it was his opportunity and maybe his opportunity only in Philly. And on the flip side with Sam Dre, and then I'll pass it over to you to comment about this game, is okay, they got the win. That's great. You beat the Eagles by 6. I think we're all begging for Trey Lance season. Jimmy Garoppolo, very underwhelming. Elijah Mitchell and everybody spent all their fab budget on in annual leagues this year. 2.5 yards a carry, 42 rushing yards. George Kittle, good God, terrible again. Like, just another guy who they like to run the ball in San Fran, unless even old Jimmy, before he got hurt and all this stuff, like, threw the ball to Kittle a little bit more. But it seems like until Ayuk is up to speed, and I'm going to check his snap count and stuff while you're talking and look into that a little bit more. Debo is the alpha in this offense. And I think right now he's the only one I can comfortably roster in, 3 max type stuff. Although if Kittle's ownership goes down to next to nothing, I mean, I'll keep burning money and playing him at low ownership if that's possible. So what did you learn from San Fran and the Eagles in this one?
Well, I think we have to take away and give the fact that both defenses actually are pretty good. I honestly thought that San Francisco, I actually made plays to spend on scores on the outside for the people. So I really thought the Eagles were going to pull that one out of wings. I didn't really think that the 49ers were going to be that good of a defense this year with a lot of their people out and on IR. Since they have a decent amount of people, and especially their top people. and starters, but they still performed well. And it was, like I said, always next man up, and they stepped to the plate and played well in the Eagles, and it was a smash mouth of a game. I think you just, when it comes to the Eagles side of it, you have to just target Devontae Smith. You can't target nobody else on that team. Maybe Dallas Goedert. That's the only other person I would look to, because I'm pretty sure he has a big target share too as well. But just Hurts paired with Smith or Goddard is the way I would go with that team. Everyone else is viable, maybe in big, large field like Millie Maker GPPs, if you want to go that route. But other than that, just those two guys are the main guys I could take away. But and then when it comes to San Francisco, Miles Sanders as well. I'm sorry, I forgot about him. He's someone you definitely have to play. Like, I know he didn't play that well last week, but this amount of work he's going to get, you have to consider him every single week that he's on the field, because he's going to probably get those short passes, dump offs in the backfield. He's going to get the rushing attempts too as well. So he's like in a mini way, like a mini Alvin Kamara, which a lot of these running backs are mostly trying to go these days. I feel so. He's someone I definitely would take a look at for sure, and he can obviously have any type of GPP winning upside in almost any game that he's featured in. And then when it comes to the 49ers, Jimmy G is not the same Jimmy G as we used to know and before. So, but that offense is just a mess. Shanahan, I don't know what he is doing. To me, that kind of it boggles my mind. I didn't have no shares of that running backs committee last week, and I'm proud of it, because it's just a mess. He always wants to feed a hot hand. There's no true one back situation. To me, the hot hand is whoever can run through run well that play through a line that's blocking well is the hot hand, I guess, and breaking tackles. But every running back is going to pretty much break tackles and fight for yardage. That's what the nature of a running back is, someone who's played that position. So I would pretty much not touch the running backs at all. And they actually just brought in two guys this week, because I think all three of the running backs got hurt that game. Hasty got hurt. He's actually out, I think, with the high ankle sprain. And then we got Elijah Mitchell with the shoulder, from what I'm looking at here. And then Trey Sermon, he got a concussion. So all three of the running backs still end up getting hurt in one single game, and they're bringing in two guys that, from what I saw earlier. I can't remember who they were bringing in. Let me see if I can pull that up really quick. I believe one of them was because they're going to be fantasy viable, I think, for week 2, if they're even on the slate. If they're even on the slate for week 2, if they don't have a bye. I'll get back to that and find that out. But I know they did bring in two running backs that I think will end up being probably really cheap guys, especially if they're on the slate, that maybe you can look at if they're gonna get some playing time and get a lot of work. But that's yet to be seen when it comes to Kyle Shanahan and him favoring one guy over the other. I would still target Brandon Ayuk for sure, because he's going to get caught up to speed eventually. Deebo Samuel, like you said, is the main guy now offense right now. Take advantage of that while you can. I would use that. And play Kittle every single week, because we know Kittle's upside. We know what he can be and what he is. It's just more so, is Jimmy G going to be able to give him the ball or not? That's how I look at it as. 49ers, and also the Eagles do have a good defense. That's one thing I did learn too as well, that I don't think no one probably is thinking right now, but their front seven is legit. Their front seven is legit, and their secondary can play well in some spots. And I think that's the main reason why they were able to not let Kittle succeed this week as much as we thought, because Pittsburgh even didn't have a good week 1 against them, and he had a better week in week 2 against the Buccaneers, who played a little bit softer up front, and was pretty much trying to just protect the middle of the field and not allow any deep plays or deep balls. So I definitely took away that from it for sure, that the Eagles are going to have a decent defense for sure. They just need to get their offense together and get on the same page, and more rapport, more reps. I think between Hurts and Smith will be great for them, and great for us fantasy-wise too as well. And San Francisco, like you said, we're just waiting to see when Trey Lance will come in and play and take over that job, because as soon as he comes in, I think then you'll have a real reason for the 49ers to take off and be really successful, because you have someone who can run around the ball, run and be mobile, but also throw that ball and get it to the receivers on the deep routes, and not be a little bit more conservative, as I would say with Jimmy G. I feel is a lot of.
Final game we'll talk about, and I feel like we could have 5 hours and talk about all these games because there's so many storylines. But and then we'll get into some injuries. But the chalkiest game of the day, as a whole, Dallas and the Chargers, 20-17, broke a lot of hearts there.
My heart too, really bad.
I had a lot of exposure to that game, which is why my Brady Lions didn't cash. But here's what we learned is that Tony Pollard had 13 carries and was productive when he had him. However, he only played 34% of the snaps to Zeke's 71. That's 10% more than week one. What if we keep climbing? What if Zeke isn't, maybe McCarthy? McCarthy's never been one to really go crazy about the run game when he was in Green Bay. Of course, you have Hall of Fame quarterbacks. I get it. But, eventually good play is going to outweigh someone who's not playing well. And maybe Pollard, maybe this gets to even more of an even timeshare as the season goes on. Something to keep an eye on, because 10% more snaps in a fairly even game script, that wasn't lopsided when Pollard, who used to be more of a pass catcher, complete change of pace guy, is something to keep an eye on. But an encouraging thing from a DFS standpoint, although the Chargers only put up 17 points, they still threw the ball 41 times with Herbert. So in a neutral game script, they're just not built to run. Austin Eckler is great at what he does, but they don't have a true change of pace, Latavius Murray-esque bruiser to carry between the tackles. He had 9 rushing attempts in a fairly even game script. But this is great because we know if they're going to pass much more than they run, we know where this volume's going. Keenan Allen, 8 targets, 108 yards on only 4 catches. Mike Williams, wow, finally using the guy the way he should be used. 10 targets, 91 yards on 7 catches and a touchdown. And oh my God, Austin Eckler had no targets week 1. Well, he had 9 in a fairly even game script in week 2. So that's great. I think it's much easier for us to decipher, hey, these are the 3 guys to target from this team in probably any situation, because we know the volume's going there. We didn't get the 30 points we wanted out of the Chargers. Now, Herbert still threw for over 330, just didn't get the touchdown equity. So I think the Chargers are fine. And it was actually encouraging from a DFS standpoint to, okay, this is where the ball's definitely going this season, to those 3 guys. This was a bit of a bummer on the Dallas side for the most part. So, Cooper and CD were projected 2 of the highest owned receivers, and I think they came in at the 2 highest ownerships in most formats, or they were close. So, give me a little breakdown on this game while I pull up the injury report, and we'll dive into that next.
Yeah, I just think that when it comes to this game, it was complete letdown. First of all, like I was at the field on these quarterbacks, thought they were going to perform more better than what they did, and they didn't. But I think that, like you said, that it was pretty much a good takeaway to see that Justin was getting a lot of the passing work still. 41 attempts is a lot. I think the ceiling is probably a little bit higher for that for him as far as attempt wise. But they're going to still continue to pass it. They have no running game, like you mentioned before. Austin Eckler, I think that showed a good sign, because he didn't get that much work in the passing game in the first game, but he did the second game. So I think it's something they're going to be going with more forward with them too. So Austin Eckler, I think it's going to be fantasy value. I'm interested in seeing, like you said, with Mike Williams, is he going to continue to get this much volume, this much targets, this much work? Because that was great to see. It took away, though, a little bit from Keenan Allen, from us normally seeing him having like 15, 16 targets and a lot of catches, a lot of yards. But if they have more of a balanced attack, I think it'll be great for them. So I'd like this offense going forward, targeting them in for fantasy value, especially Mike Williams. I think people are still going to be low on Mike Williams, just because we don't know how true that is. We haven't seen that consistency enough from him, and to see if that's going to happen. So I think if it happens more so, then we'll get a little bit higher ownership on him. But I like targeting him for sure. And the Cowboys side, I think we're going to definitely try to see. That's definitely a situation with the Pollard situation, something to pay attention to. I don't know what McCarthy's going to do. I was surprised and shocked to see that Pollard was in a lot more of the plays than he was from week one, especially when you have Zeke. And I thought he was going to be running the ball a lot more, which they both were effective running the ball. Don't get me wrong, but I just felt like Zeke deserved more of the workload in that situation, especially coming off week one, where Tampa Bay just has a good front seven as far as from a rushing defense standpoint, and can get after the quarterback. So I just felt that was just a little surprising to me, but we can see possibly in the future more of a timeshare. It is a long season too. We got to think about it too, that it is 17 games instead of the normal 16 now. So an extra game is going to put more of a toll on your body, and then maybe they want to preserve Zeke for the whole season and make sure he doesn't get hurt. But Pollard also has earned earn more looks in the backfield as well. Targets, I think, is worth it too. It's also another option, and we didn't think about that too. I think that was the reason too why. Which honestly, if we would have thought about that, I think ahead of time, he would have been a lot more fantasy. He would have definitely been fantasy viable because we were targeting the third receiver on the team on the depth chart for the Cowboys. I forgot their names
because Wilson.
Yes, Wilson. Yeah, we were targeting them a lot, but that since Gallup was out, Pollard is a pass catching back. That was the right move to make, or a good contrarian GPP move to make, is to play Pollard, because Pollard would get some work out of the backfield, which he did, and that could have been a part of game script and the reason why too. So that's something important to play, is to pay attention with and see going forward. Is he still going to get more work when Gallup comes back, or is this going to just be just a thing where they lose a receiver and they want Pollard to step up and play a little bit more of a bigger role on the team? So I think that's something we have to look at, but I like it. I think it makes them more dynamic going forward, and it should be something that we should be excited about going forward, especially using them in fantasy. I know the game wasn't the pace we wanted it to be, but it showed also that the Cowboys have a little fight in them defensively, even though I still think they're horrible and not that much better than they were last year. But I think that we can still target all these guys in fantasy. We know that where the concentration is going to go with Cooper, Gallup, with Cooper, Gallup when he's healthy, and CeeDee Lamb, who went off, had a phenomenal day as well. So, and obviously the running back with Zeke and Pollard, now you have to consider, I think, a little bit.
Let's go through some of these injuries, and we'll try to go rather quickly because we can tie some of this into the recipe for success and looking ahead at week 3. But, man, bad week for quarterbacks in terms of injuries. Andy Dalton, we don't know. I don't know. We're waiting for an MRIs, right? We don't see how bad the bone bruise is. There's no word if Dalton's going to start or if it's going to be Justin Fields against Cleveland. Give me a real quick synopsis. Obviously, in my opinion, I'm thinking you're going to agree with me, Justin Fields would be a huge upgrade to this Bears offense in terms of fantasy output.
I'm making a bold call now. Justin Fields is playing week 3. A bone bruise, if you're able to play, I mean, he came back out and tried to play, but I think he wasn't himself. Keep him out a week, rest him, but just hope Justin Fields will take your job. But I think Justin Fields can perform well in this matchup, and he's going to be extremely popular, I think. What is his price on? Let me look at his price.
5,200 on DK.
5,200 on DK against, and then we have, what is it on FanDuel? Oh, goodness gracious.
Tell you in just a second, but keep going. I got you.
6,500 on FanDuel.
Yeah.
He just gets a tough matchup against the Cleveland defense, which is a pretty good defense, but I think he's still worth a fantasy shot in deep tournaments and big field tournaments, because you never know what can happen. But I like it. I don't think Andy Dalton's going to play. I think that he's just going to rest as a bone bruise, and that's something kind of serious. Unless he takes a shot and feels amazing going into later on in the week. But that's not something I see someone getting over rather quickly.
I agree. I think maybe we'll see Fields, and I think if he starts, I think he might keep the job. As much as Nagy was bullish on Dalton, where he's the starter, blah, blah, blah. I know, I get it. Plus, Justin Fields, any quarterback with rushing upside at 5,200 is very intriguing to me. That's all he needs to crush is a rushing touchdown, 50 yards, and he was pedestrian through the air. That's fine. Similar price range, Tua unfortunately going down, bruised ribs, or so they say. We'll get word on Tua. Jacoby Brissett came in. I'm going to duck when I say this for the Tua truthers, but right now, I don't think there's much of a gap between Brissett and Tua in terms of how this offense, like where the targets are going to go, like game managers ish. Deep ball doesn't really move the needle for me. A little bit of scrambling upside. Like in terms of Jalen Waddle, who I really like, and Devontae Parker, I just wish someone else was throwing him the ball. What's your quick take on this one?
Yeah, I agree with you. I at Tua plays, he's a little bit more viable, but this Vegas team has been playing out of their minds lately. I'm surprised that they played this well the first two games. I just like Jacoby because he's going to target these guys a lot. They pass the ball a lot, 440 attempts. He's not fantasy relevant in my opinion, like you said. He had 40 attempts for 169 yards, one interception, no passing touchdowns, and 4 rushes for only 8 yards. He's not a scrambling quarterback by any means. He looks to stay in the pocket and throw the ball down the field, and I don't think he's someone we should target or look at. And his price is a little price, and he's a little bit high priced too at 6,700, or at least on FanDuel. I don't know what his DK price is, so I have that pulled up yet, but it is a little pricey, and so I don't see myself getting to.
Carson Wentz allegedly sprained not one ankle, but both of his ankles.
I don't understand. How do you sprain both of your ankles?
I don't know, man, but I'm a Titans fan. I'm hoping they bury the Colts to 0-3 this week, with or without Wentz. We'll see. Even if Wentz is 50%, I think that's a huge leg up for this Titans defense that has struggled. So obviously, I like that offense much better if Carson Wentz plays than Jacob Eason or whoever the backup is there. That's kind of frightening. So Michael Pittman came to life. Everybody wrote him off after week 1. So I think he's an interesting target. I think you're with me here. We want Carson Wentz to play for fantasy purposes for the Colts, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. I definitely I want to see the game be competitive. I do. And once he does have the upside, he'll be able to target those players a lot. I think if you have the other quarterback playing, it's just going to be ugly real quick and just play the Tennessee defense all week. They will probably be the most popular defense once we get word that he's out, and they are priced at 2,400 on DK. 2,400, ladies and gentlemen.
I'm going to say something that only, if you watched every snap of both Titans games, that the pass rush actually wasn't bad. They had a couple of terrible, like middle school blown coverages. And of course they got terrible field position in the Arizona game in week 1. That Bud Dupree looks good. Jeffrey Simmons looks good. Harold Landry. I mean, you play outside of Mahomes, Kyler Murray and Russell Wilson are not the two quarterbacks you want to open up your season with, maybe outside of Lamar, in terms of acrobats outside of the pocket. So I think with more traditional step back and throw quarterbacks, listen, I don't think I ever played the Titans D in DFS, and I'm a fan, but their streaming option this week against, if Wentz is not a go, and maybe even if Wentz is just kind of limited, I think, everybody looks for cheap defenses with upside. I think you make a good point there. Derek Carr and his 104 quarterback rating is really balling out. So he got hurt, underwent an MRI on Monday. Status is uncertain against Miami. I guess since no one's super worried about it, my gut says he probably plays, but we'll see about that. One thing, another injury I did see on the timeline is apparently Darrell Henderson's banged up, rib injury. We can kind of move into next week. There was a couple other injuries. Deontay Johnson, we don't know his status. Why waste time on it? Hope he's okay. Big part of that Pittsburgh offense. If he doesn't play, obviously Claypool, bumping value, obvious stuff there. So Henderson, though, if he doesn't play, right? Sony Michel traded for has barely played. The kicker is they're going up against Tampa Bay in that ferocious defensive line there. So we can kind of open up our recipes for success segment here, looking ahead with, if Henderson's out, what do you do with Sony Michel at 4,900? I know it's a big if, but that popped up a couple hours ago, and rib injuries for a running back are not usually comfortable. So let's start there. I mean, 4,900 on DK. What do you think his ownership would even come in at?
See, I don't know. Like, I want to say about 10-15%, I would like to say. His ownership coming in at. He ran the ball pretty well, too, on 10 attempts for 46 yards when he came in against Indy on those last couple of drives. The Tampa Bay, their front is just – Mike Davis played how many yards? Let me look at Mike Davis' stat against him. I don't think he had. I don't like comparing stats with other quarterbacks because also he gets a lot of work in the receiving game too. So Mike Davis got there just because of the receiving work he got. So the front seven is what kind of bothers me a little bit, but I think it's definitely is something you can attack. I would target Sony Michel and have him in a couple lineups. I probably would have to dig into a little bit more, but I think getting to probably 5% is where I would get to him. I think the field would be more at 10, 15% because his price is so low. And at that price, even if he gives you like 50 yards and a touchdown and maybe 2 catches, he gets the value, and that will obviously gives you room to have some tournament winning upside where you can get other players in your lineup to take advantage of that salary. So yeah, he's someone I could possibly see, but not go. I wouldn't be ecstatic about.
Okay, that's fair. I'm sure if he gets ruled out eventually, that'll be a hot topic later this week across the industry. Tout's gonna tout, it's just gonna be, oh, what are you doing, Sony Michel? We're just never gonna hear the end of it. So we'll get that elephant in the room out of the way early. So recipe for success here. Give me, a team or two that sticks out that you're thinking about, heavily targeting this weekend.
Oh boy, heavily targeting. Well, I'm not going to go with the obvious ones because we know Arizona, I think, and Baltimore are the obvious teams to target. I still am going to attack with Seattle and Russell Wilson because I feel like this is a recipe that they do every year with Seattle is let Russ cook the first half of the season and then just grind it out with the running game and prep for that with their defense. So I'm going to ride the wave with Seattle and target against Minnesota. I think that could be another shootout and another big game. Both sides of the game will be great to target, in my opinion. Lockett is still one of the favorite receivers to go off, and like you said, with the target share he's getting right now, it's incredible. But DK Metcalf at some point is going to wake up and have a monster game, and I don't see why it can't be against the Minnesota Vikings for sure. So that's someone I definitely like. And one other person who I'm thinking about, and this is a disgusting, I know, guy and gross play, but he actually has been performing well for fantasy purposes. And he gets a matchup against Atlanta is Daniel Jones. How popular is Daniel Jones going to be? Because that's what I really want to know. What you think and what's your thoughts on that? Because 29.5 fantasy points against a good Washington team that I think is pretty good. Probably struggling a little bit on defense right now, and then 22 against Denver. And he's only threw 1 touchdown. That's the thing. Only 1 touchdown. That rushing upside, it helps him a lot too. So I like Daniel Jones a lot this week, and I can't seem to get away from it. The price at 58 is really good, and I love pairing him with a guy like Sterling Shepard, who I think they have a great rapport, and that's my number one team players to target from that team for sure. And then when you got Saquon, who's just going to keep getting more healthier every single week and better at running the ball, I don't see why you can't attack this defense and use a guy like Daniel Jones, especially when we know Atlanta's been horrible.
I wish this was any other matchup so I wouldn't have to worry about it. But because it's Atlanta, that we already agreed that Atlanta is probably atrocious. Maybe they'll win a game this season. I don't know. So I actually did a little bit of homework for the showdown slate Daniel Jones was on, and I got burned. But last season, he had 2 games of over 20 DraftKings points. That's it. They were both against the Eagles, by the way. His rushing upside, or whatever you want to call it, really bailed him out. The one game against Philly, he had, I think he had a rushing touchdown. Hold on, let me see. Rushing stats.
Thursday Night Football against them.
Yeah, he had that crazy run. Was that when he fell on his face? Right?
Yeah, he fell on his face, flat on his face.
Yeah, so the one game he had a rushing touchdown against the Eagles, and I'm pretty sure in the other game against Philly, he had 92 rushing yards. So, in the past, he's really needed that rushing upside to get there, and it only happened twice in a full season last season. I get it. Different season, players get better. Well, we're through 2 games of 2021. He has 95 rushing yards and a touchdown against Washington, and he has a touchdown right on the ground against Denver. Is he gonna get a 70-yard chunker again? The thing is, Atlanta's so bad. That might be the one team he doesn't need the rushing upside against. He could throw 3 touchdowns. He loves Sterling Shepard, apparently. It's the only guy he throws the freaking ball to. They probably all go to Shepard. So I'm with you. Let's stack Daniel Jones and Shepard in the middle and see what happens, man. If you were to stack, would Shepard be one of your top choices, or would you go back to Galladay or something like that?
I'll definitely have some shares of Galladay. But I really love Sterling Shepard. Like to me, PPR wise, he's just the guy who always gets the routes underneath and the short and the middle routes, middle of the field. I will target, and they look to him a lot. So and he's always a mismatch, seems like. So because he always gets a linebacker to the inside corner, which to me they can't really guard him a lot. So I love Shepard in this matchup. I think that he's going to have a phenomenal day. I'm not going to lie. I probably will be over the field on Daniel Jones as much as disgusting as that sounds. But I'll definitely be well over the field on him. I can't help it. And to me, the matchup is too good to not take advantage of it for sure.
I'm getting deja vu of last year. I forget what week it was, but it was like the Drew Lock week where he pretty popular and he was around the same price range against Atlanta. And he was like terrible at that. And then in the second half, he just went off. He had a huge run. I'm just getting visions of Daniel Jones, below average quarterbacks with a little bit of legs that just find a way to exceed value against Atlanta. So, and you know what? The Giants defense has been like respectable, and I thought they'd be pretty good coming in. So again, I don't know what to think about Atlanta. I think they're pretty bad. So I'm with you. I don't mind some Giants exposure here. But for me, I want to go back and talk about the guy you mentioned at the top of the show is Kirk Cousins. I haven't seen much. I'm not impressed with the Seattle defense. Now they're coming off a gut-wrenching loss at home to Tennessee, and that's either going to work one of two ways. You know, Minnesota coming off same thing, gut-wrenching loss against Arizona. So I kind of like, I don't know if I'm in love with playing Cousins, but I think Jefferson might finally have a game. Like this Seattle secondary, outside of Jamal Adams, he's not really a coverage guy. He's more of an in-the-box thumper. They don't scare me. I'm curious to see what these Vikings receivers come in at. It's been all Thielen so far and a little bit of Osborne if you're stacking Millie or your waiver wire claiming this week. But I think maybe it's finally Justin Jefferson week against Seattle. So I like the Vikings this week. Who else you kind of targeting, Trey?
One other person here that I'm definitely looking at for the quarterback and the stacks to go with is Teddy B. Teddy B against that horrible Jets secondary, which can't seem to perform that well. Their defense, I know, is decent up front, but I think that secondary can be beat. And of course, I think when you got Cortland Sutton and Noah Fant out there, you can definitely do some damage. And Teddy Bridgewater is a smart quarterback where I think he can take advantage of that. So that's someone else I'm looking to definitely try to target and get to in my lineups next week for sure. And he definitely was peppered Sutton with a lot of targets. So I love that. And it was good to see, especially when we know that Jerry Jeudy's going to be out for a little while now. So that's someone I definitely will look to target. And I will also have the other receivers on there, like Hamler. And then there was just one more other receiver on their team. I'm drawing a blank on his name, but I will definitely have him for sure in my tournament lineups next week.
Speaking of the Vikings, Dre, Dalvin Cook had about the quietest 130 yards on the ground because he didn't score. I mean, he still had 19 DraftKings points. In week 1, he was kind of a flop. Had 60 yards against the Bengals, 3 yards a pop. Ran better against Arizona, who people were claiming to be world beaters after mauling the Titans. So I'm curious, like last week in terms of roster construction, not everyone, a lot of the public floated around using one of those 6K running backs because they were in great spots. Chris Carson, David Montgomery, etc. So I'm wondering if kind of paying all the way up top, again, is going to be the differentiator. I don't know. Are people going to look at what are people going to think of Henry? Obviously, monster performance. The Colts are typically pretty good against the run, but there's still a lot of pretty fair priced running backs. Chris Carson's still 6,400. People might take stabs at Barkley. Najee Harris was super popular because he didn't come off the field in week 1. Jonathan Taylor against the Titans, if you still think Tennessee stinks, they're all below 7K. So I'm curious what the ownership up top is going to be because you have Henry, you have Dalvin Cook, who, is pretty expensive. And I think people are going to go to the receivers in that, looking at Jefferson and Thielen. And then you have Kamara, who struggled, and Nick Chubb, with a less than ideal matchup against Chicago. So I don't know. Dalvin Cook's intriguing to me because I don't know if ownership's going to go there. He hasn't really had that monster game yet.
I think it will go there actually. I think we seen Taylor have 72 yards against them week one, and then we just see Derrick Henry go off and have a monster game against them week two. So, and I think rightfully so. Minnesota can run the ball pretty effectively, as we saw that he did against Arizona, and they're going to make sure. I think Cook gets around like 20 rushing attempts each game. So I think he is definitely someone I'm going to get to a lot. I think people will get to him a lot. I don't see why he shouldn't be one of the highest owned running backs this week coming up. Nick Chubb, I think, is matchup proof. Honestly, he's someone I really truly think that you just have to play every single week, because he like Derrick Henry, who I think you have to play every single week too. At this point, can break one off for a big game, in a big rushing game. So I think you have to play those guys, and I really think that the ownership will dictate that, at least for Cook. Henry, I don't know if we're gonna have it like we used to in the past, where we had like people who are just look at stats obviously and see that Henry had 182 yards on the ground, and then he had 3 touchdowns and 50 fantasy points. If we have people like that, then yeah, I think then Henry's going to be popular. But I think that Henry is someone where I think the field's going to be lower on. If they are lower on him again, and he's end up being digit owned, I think I'm going to play obviously double the field on it, because it's going to be low ownership to begin with. But I don't think he's going to be that popular compared to Cook. I think Cook going to be the most, like I said, the most popular one on the slate. But I do have a sneaky running back that I do like, that impressed me a little bit, that I don't think anyone is going to play a lot of, but he seems to be getting a lot more work in that offense with that I saw. And the Giants are good up front, but I think was it Patterson? Uh, Patterson is someone I look at 4,600. I know it's a boom or bust play, but this man had 2 touchdowns on Sunday against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And granted, he had 7 rushing attempts, and then he had like 5 receptions. But if he's going to get 7 rushing attempts a game at 4,600, all he needs to do is give me a touchdown with that, and get about 50 yards. I'll be fine.
Career gadget guy Cordell. People love playing him in Showdown when he was in Chicago. Let's see what his snap count was. And just going back to that Atlanta game, man, Kenny Golladay, 5,600. How much is Sterling Shepard? I know you were talking about Shepard, but man, I'm assuming you can play this little giant stack and have enough money to do whatever you want with.
Yeah, Sterling Shepard's only 5,900.
Wow.
So you can make this a whole game stack realistically, and go off, because the only probably most expensive guy in this game is probably Ridley, and that's 7K.
Patterson saw 33% of the snaps in both weeks, but with the trailing game script, and they're going to need a spark, maybe he gets more involved. We saw him taking snaps at running back pretty frequently last year for Chicago when they were dinged up. So I think that's really interesting too. Let me tell you a couple of things that the DK algo was sleeping on the wheel at. We talked about the Chargers before. So Keenan Allen is cheaper than he was last week against Kansas City. And you got to think that game script could be, the Chargers are going to throw the ball. 6,600 for Keenan Allen. The fact that he's cheaper kind of blows my mind. I would assume he's going to be very popular. Adam Thielen is cheaper as well. He was 71 last week, 6,700 this week against Seattle. 17 targets through 3 games. He has 3 touchdowns. I don't understand those. I think we're going to see a lot of ownership go there, and rightfully so. I think we should keep an eye on Allen Robinson, especially if your bold prediction comes through of Justin Fields starting, because I'm disappointed with the lack of targets last week. 4 targets. Come on. Justin Fields, if he comes in, I think he'll pepper Allen Robinson. And, man, I feel like you're scratching your head like, man, Luuch, why are you giving away some of my plays coming up Sunday? But how do you not love that price at Allen Robinson at 6,200, man?
He's a good price, and if he is going to be rookie, I feel like rookie quarterbacks look for guys. I would say they have good rapport with, or the best receiver on the team, so that way they can, that's their security blanket. Allen Robinson runs enough of those short routes where they can pretty much have that be his security blanket. So if Justin Fields starts, I think those targets will be peppered towards him. Him and Komet, I think, will be the top 2 targets from there, and I like that a lot. And another receiver I'm really interested in this because obviously we were talking about with Keenan Allen, Cooper Kupp against Tampa Bay, who that secondary, I think they lost their starter. I think they lost one of their starting quarterbacks on the third play or the third drive of the game to a hamstring injury, if I'm correct. But Cooper Kupp is only 6,800. I don't think he was priced up enough, and he can have another monster week against this team. Because to me, it's either pick your poison, him or Robert Woods. Who do you want to beat you this week? And then if they can have some formless of a running game, they'll be fine to go with too. So I think this mid-tier wide receivers are going to be someone to target heavy and to look at. Mike Williams, 6,400 as well. We got Julio Jones at 6,500, along with A.J. Brown, who I think is a phenomenal thing to target. We talked about Sterling Shepard already at 5,900, who I love. Is probably going to be my top receiving play on the slate. Marquise Brown going into Detroit against 5,600. Like Hollywood Brown at that price. I mean, I get it, but he's performed well the first two games of the season, doing a lot of different routes, not just being used as a deep ball threat. So I like getting to him a lot at that price too. And on top, I feel like you always gotta throw D Hop in there, especially against Jacksonville. But we know that already that he can have a monster game. But those to me are like the top plays. Obviously, we mentioned Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf as well. But those are the plays I'm definitely looking at as our early look for next week.
One more guy who it's good to see healthy. Everybody was curious who would fill in for Jerry Jeudy. Not fill in, but step up. Courtland Sutton, 12 targets, 9 catches against Jacksonville. Is he back? Are we seeing the Courtland Sutton of 2019 before he unfortunately got hurt? What are your thoughts there?
I love Courtland Sutton this week too. To me, it's one of my other top targets. I like him and Tim Patrick. That was the other guy I was looking at before, talking about earlier. Tim Patrick, I think, is a guy that we have to look at. He had about the same amount of he had not the same amount. He only had 4 targets, which he had in the first game, but he had a touchdown each of the first 2 games. So that guy in their fantasy wise about 4,900 of a price that gets you there, and that helps out a lot. So that's someone I definitely am going to look for. And Courtland Sutton is, to me, one of the top plays, in my opinion, at wide receiver. And I don't think his ownership is going to be that high. I don't think so. It should be, but I don't think with all these other receivers in that price range, and people might be looking to try to go to other games, might think that the Jets secondary is really something to fear. I'm not afraid of it. I'm just going to play a lot of
them. One thing FanDuel got right is pricing up Kyler to 9K. DK, highest priced quarterback at 8,300. I guess I kind of understand if it's there's a little bit different of a setup on both sites, but I watched him destroy Tennessee week 1, make Super Bowl worthy plays, like disgusting things, Sandlot style throws on the money. Like if it was Mahomes, we'd still be talking about it. And he'll make some mistakes. He has 3 picks through 2 weeks, but listen, his rushing upside is back. He's not running a ton, but he has touchdowns in both games. Threw for a measly 400 yards in week 2, and almost 300 against Tennessee, but he had 4 touchdowns. So we're talking Jacksonville. Like there's a good chance they hang 40. I don't have the team total in front of me. I don't think Kyler Murray is expensive enough on DK in this matchup, man. I know we said we weren't going to talk about the obvious, but like that's the play. Right? Like maybe we don't overthink it. You can we were talking before the show, Dre. You can make 10 reasons why you should play somebody on a slate, and I can't argue with you. But to me, Kyler Murray is it at quarterback.
To me, if you don't have at least one lineup with them in DK or FanDuel, something's wrong with you. Just play the guy, because he even at that price of 9K, he still might be the highest scoring quarterback on the slate. Like that's how much upside he brings to that, and that's still crazy to think about with that price point, because there's still cheap enough receivers where you can get and that have the upside for GPP winnings, winning upside in a tournament. So to me, that's someone I definitely want to have a decent amount of exposure to for sure. I'm gonna make my quarterback pool though very small. I'm gonna try to limit it this week because there's a lot of good quarterbacks on the slate that I love so far.
Yeah, I mean, really, it's loaded. Lamar in Detroit. God, we talked about that and how good Marquise Brown has been since really the second half of last year when he's been healthy. So, it should be a fun week and a good chance to kind of make a dent, make some good stands here. We need to wrap up soon. So, is there anything else looking ahead you want to get off your chest here?
Only thing I would say real quick is play Darren Waller. That man's matchup proof. I think he's gonna bounce back on a big game against Miami. But other than that, not really. Just I'm gonna try to be more available this week. If anyone want to ask me some questions on Twitter, I know I tend to not post a lot sometimes. But I'm gonna try to be a little bit more active on there, just so I can get my thoughts out about what I think about this week. And also get some feedback of what y'all think about this week and also different things. I'll be actually traveling a little bit as usual. I'm always everywhere. I'm like Carmen Sandiego on the go always. So I'll be up in Vegas for a couple of days just to get away for a bit and then come back and also hit up Arizona. So if you got any food takes in both of those places, let me know. Arizona and Vegas. I need some good food takes that aren't the obvious, that are like hidden gems. I need those ASAP.
We'll get to GPP food of the day soon, and I'm curious to see what you have up your sleeve. But we got our story time segment. That was one of Chief's ideas, and just to kind of have a little relatable content. And I guess I had a pretty lame week outside of the Titans shocking the world, and I was trying to do the Sunday night showdown show while the game was in overtime. So it was pretty cool to see the chat keep me posted. But my girlfriend has a 6-year-old. I'm like, the inherited stepdad, which is cool. And I thought we had a pretty good week of parenting, like nothing went completely wrong. But, remember that show Kids Say the Darndest Things? Like, I feel like I should be keeping a book or something. He's in first grade and he came home and was like, yeah, we learned about that book, and I'm like, I don't know what book you're talking about. He's like, the one that they wrote. I'm like, all right, is he talking about the Bible or something? Like, I don't know. Like, I'm not religious. Like, you're talking to the wrong guy, kid, man. Sorry. And it turns out he's talking about the Constitution, or whatever. And he started talking about going on about the founding fathers. I'm like, do you know what the founding fathers mean? He's like, yeah, they were everyone else's fathers before we got here. I'm like, oh, not exactly, but I was like trying to explain it to him. Then he was like, when do I have football? I'm ready. The attention span wasn't there, but the whole mother father thing and the trying to explain to him that it just was like, we'll have that conversation another day. So that was the one thing where I actually was just tongue tied. And I'm like, no, they weren't everybody's fathers before we got here, but at least he's trying. So A for effort. You have anything interesting or off the wall happened to you lately, Dre?
There's always something I think that's interesting with me, but like one thing I can say is I'm learning that my dog is smarter than what I think she is. My dog is like no joke. Probably I have a Pomsky, so I think she's probably one of the smartest dogs I've ever had in my life. I think dogs are just smart in general, but this little girl here, like every time she wants to go out, she'll bark and go by the door or something, or when we let her out her crate, she'll just go run to the door. This time she got spiteful with me because I wouldn't give her a treat. And so she's at the top of the steps. I'm down below, like, hey, come on, let's go. You're not getting a treat, but let's come outside so we go. And she's just barking at me, like pretty much telling me, like, no, Dad, I'm not doing it. I'm not going. I'm like, if this is what I have to deal with kids, then I don't know how I'm gonna be because I'm not patient with this. So, but I'm learning. And then she just kept barking at me. I said, oh, nah, come on, let's go. And so I said, you know what? I said, you're not getting any treats, and I don't care. I'm going downstairs. I'm done with this. So she decides to piss on the floor.
She laid the law down, man.
And then run away and laugh. Like, I mean, obviously she can't laugh, but if she could, I'm assuming she was laughing because she ran away, knew she was in trouble, but was happy as hell that she did it. And she knew she was, and I just had to chase her and clean it all up. I'm like, these dogs, spiteful, first of all, but they are smart. They are definitely smart. It's just made me realize that, wow, like I really want to see how much I could push her to her limit as far as knowledge wise and see what she can do next. So like my sister showed me this thing where online where they have these commands where the dog will talk back to you, and tell you like, hey, or I want treat, no, yes, different commands like
They like
that.
push the buttons or whatever.
Yeah, when they push the buttons, my sister showed me that video of a dog who did that. I was asking for more treats, and she was just like, "No, you're not getting any more." She's like, "I'm hungry. I want to." Like, so I'm like, "I'm gonna get that for my dog and see what I can do." So I'll stay tuned to see how the training section is gonna go for that. But I look forward to that for sure.
That's funny, man. Are you a pushover? Like, can you stay mad at your dog, or were you?
I can. I definitely can for sure. But I've been trying not to because she doesn't know any better. She's only 7 months, and she doesn't have a long attention span. I know because she just always wants to play and go right to it the next minute afterwards.
Well, I feel you on the smart dog thing, and sometimes they're too smart. On top of a 6-year-old in our townhouse, we have a border collie, and she's awesome. Like, best dog I ever had. And for a while, she was really scared of when we record, I have a green screen that retracts. It's like portable. It's pretty sweet. You just pull it up and it probably gets up to like, 6.5 feet. She was so scared of it. I don't know if it was the noise or whatever. She's a chick. She's a chicken. She's a chicken. She likes to be heard though. But she finally, like, she's almost 2. Like, I was like, she'll go downstairs when I'm recording. I pulled the green screen up Sunday night. She comes measling back in and we're about to go on. And she's like putting her paws on my lap, trying to like look for a treat or something too. Cause usually if she's in there, if she comes back, I'll give her a treat to be good. No, she's doing her thing. And she finally outgrew it. So I'm like, man, we got an issue now. I got to start locking her out of the room. When we record, that's all I need to be on Grinders Live. And she like knocks the whole freaking thing down, like, what do you do, man? The show must go on, I guess. But
yeah, she did. My dog actually just did that to me last week. She almost jumped on screen because she got let out of her cage and then just ran down here and just tried to jump all over me.
At least we got an excuse if something happens, be on alert. It's probably one of our dogs just messing with us. But Dre, before we get out of here, you got any food takes? In honor of Chief being out this week for this week's podcast. Like give me a food take. You got a local spot, what do you get on game days? Like what's going on? Give us something here.
Well, game days I have a recipe that I pretty much I try to pretty much do it almost every Sunday. I haven't done it actually yet this Sunday, but I typically take like some type of I make this dip. Pretty much it's pretty simple, but like I use like queso, use like the Doritos queso that they have, or not the Doritos, the Tortitos queso that they have. When you use whatever type of meat you like, whether it's turkey meat, which is what I prefer to use, but you can go with beef. If you want, cook it on thing at first, season it up real good. Put that queso dip in a pan with the meat. After you mix it all up together, and then put some like regular cheese on this, shredded cheese. Just make it as cheesy as possible. Cheese as possible. And then you want some sour cream. You put on the side with that. It's everything else, and then just heat up and wait for it to melt. You can put a little bit of tiny little bit of milk if you want, just to make it a little more creamy. And it comes out really, really good. To me, that's my Sunday dip that I have every Sunday when I watch football, typically. I can pretty much go through a whole thing in like a sitting. It's just amazing. It's just so good. So yeah, if you want to try to make it, let me know if you need, it's just a simple recipe. You can take like 10 minutes, but to me, it's like the best thing in the world and good to have on Sundays.
Yeah, we just got I think a buffalo chicken dip from Costco. I don't know if that's a Northeast thing or what, but I have a decent recipe for buffalo chicken dip too. But everybody kind of does their own thing. They fire up the crock pot up here. So if anybody's got a good buffalo chicken dip recipe, perfect for game days, I want to hear it too. So we got to get on out of here though. Check Dre out on Twitter at BXBoogieDre. Dre, what do you got on tap for this week? You on any RG stuff or anything like that?
Yeah, I'll be on a couple episodes I believe for MLB later on in the week. I think maybe tomorrow. And then after that I'll just be prepping for football. Then I'll be on next Sunday. So getting ready for that, giving some hot takes, hopefully to win a lot of money. And give some people good place to win a lot of money and have this bounce back week because Lord knows I need it. So we'll see what happens though.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it. Every Sunday, RotoGrinders has a grind before kickoff. Dre's on one of the early shows. I'm on crunch time at 12:30 to answer some last-minute questions. So definitely kick it with us on Sundays, whether you're in for the long haul or just rolling out of bed late and trying to fire some lineups in. So for Andre, who's filling in for Will, I'm Justin Carlucci. Good luck in week 3, everybody.